All right, let's get into it. Remember that whole stack of articles you sent over, the ones about Huawei and 5G and, well, it seemed like every time you turn around, there's another crazy headline.
Yeah, it's a story that definitely grabs your attention, and for good reason, I think. This isn't just about tech, is it? This is global power dynamics playing out on, like, a digital battlefield.
Exactly. And the articles you shared, all from Dwyer.eu, they definitely have a point of view. Pro-Huawei, skeptical of the West, and let me tell you, they are quick to call out what they see as hypocrisy.
Right. Multiple perspectives are definitely key in a story this complex. And Dwyer.eu really digs into a different side of this story. The stakes are high.
Okay, so we went through this mountain of articles you sent, and there are definitely some recurring themes. Like, it's this whole saga with distinct chapters. First, you've got Huawei under attack. I mean, the U.S. is going all in sanctions, accusing them of spying, even pressuring allies to shut Huawei out of their 5G development. Talk about intense.
It's a full court press, that's for sure. And I think to really understand it, you have to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. The U.S. has enjoyed technological dominance for, well, decades. And Huawei's rapid rise, well, it's a direct challenge to that dominance.
And Huawei is fighting back big time. They're pouring resources into research and development, workarounds to U.S. restrictions, photonic chips, graphene chips. They've even got their own operating system now, HarmonyOS, which, from what I'm seeing, is gaining some real traction.
It is. It's actually fascinating to watch. Huawei is almost turning this adversity into an innovation engine. They've been forced to become more self-reliant, and it's really pushing technological boundaries. I think this whole thing is going to have huge implications, not just for Huawei, but for the global tech scene.
Like, they were backed into a corner and came out swinging, and Dwyer.eu does not let up there. They go hard on what they call the hypocrisy of the West. Basically, they're saying the U.S. is playing a double game, one set of rules for their own tech companies, a whole different set for Huawei.
It's a really interesting point they raise. If security is the real concern, why this laser focus on Huawei? When you look at it from that perspective, Dwyer.eu's argument that this is about control more than anything else starts to make you wonder.
Right. Do as I say, not as I do. It's like they're saying, okay, let's dive into some of the specifics here, because some of the stuff in these articles, I'm like, hold on. What?
Yeah, there were definitely some head-scratching moments for me, too.
Okay, first up, Huawei's innovations, because these guys aren't messing around. They've developed this AI weather model. It's called Pangu Weather, and it's supposedly blowing traditional forecasting methods out of the water, faster, more accurate. They're even claiming it can predict those super tricky typhoons that are usually so difficult to get right. And then there's the Kirin 9000's chipset.
Yeah, supposedly leaving U.S. equivalents in the dust when it comes to performance. And you've got to hand it to them, this new HarmonyOS-powered Purus 70 smartphone. The camera can capture objects flying by at 300 kilometers per hour. It's kind of mind-blowing.
Like, are we even sure this is real-world tech anymore? It's getting hard to keep up. Okay, next up, the Dutch dilemma. This whole situation with ASML, they make those, like, crazy, complex lithography machines, absolutely essential for manufacturing those high-end chips. And the U.S. has been putting the squeeze on them to cut off China, but get this, they actually increase their supply of machines to China.
It's a tough spot for ASML.
Yeah.
They're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They're a Dutch company, sure, but they're reliant on U.S. technology. They're subject to U.S. pressure. But then, China's a massive market. There's just no way they can ignore that.
Talk about trying to have your cake and eat it, too. But there's another layer to this, right? Because remember how ASML used to claim China was way behind in chip making? Well, now they're singing a different tune, praising China's progress. Chip-making wisdom, they called it. It's a complete 180.
Looks like reality might have hit ASML. They're realizing that China isn't just catching up. They're actually surpassing the West in some pretty key aspects of chip technology.
Yeah.
This is a seismic shift, potentially. Could end up changing the global semiconductor landscape for good.
And then, just to add another log to this fire, there's this whole thing with Portugal, the Portugal fiasco. They decided to ban Huawei from its 5G rollout, and the backlash is intense. I mean, the CEOs of ENNOS and Vodafone Portugal are furious, calling it suicide for the country's technological progress.
It really shows you how political pressure can overshadow what makes sense from a purely economic or technological standpoint. Portugal is essentially choosing short-term political gain, trying to please the U.S., but it could end up hurting their long-term competitiveness in this new digital world.
It's like they traded their Ferrari for, like, a used skateboard. And here's a bombshell, Signal. That super secure messaging app, Jack Dorsey, the Twitter guy. He dropped a truth bomb recently, claiming Signal actually got funding from the U.S. government for its encryption technology. And guess what? That same tech ended up in WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, all the big U.S. platforms.
Which is where this whole information war angle gets really interesting. Because if Dorsey's claim holds up, it raises serious questions about the security of these platforms that are supposed to be private. Is the U.S. government using them as a backdoor for surveillance? It makes you wonder.
So all those private messages, maybe not so private after all. That's a bit unsettling, to say the least. But we've got all these seemingly random events, all this craziness. What's the common thread here? What does it all mean?
If you kind of zoom out, I think, and you look at all these seemingly isolated events, a pattern starts to emerge. This isn't just about technology. It's about global dominance. It's about economic warfare. And it's definitely about controlling the narrative, controlling information.
Okay, whoa. Those are some heavy hitters. Break those down for me. What do you mean?
Well, you've got to start by understanding that the U.S. sees Huawei's success as a threat, a direct threat to its own technological dominance. And they're willing to use any and all means necessary to maintain that position, even if it means, crippling a competitor, even if it means pressuring allies, even if it means bending the rules a little.
So it's like a game of chess on a global scale, with entire countries as the pieces.
Exactly. And in this game, the sanctions against Huawei are like a form of economic warfare. Cripple their growth, control these critical industries. That's the goal. And this push for Open RAN, it's about reshaping the entire market in the West's favor. And then you layer on top of that this information war shaping public opinion to justify those actions.
It's like they're playing 4D chess while everyone else is stuck with checkers. This information war angle. Is it just me, or is that a little creepy? Dwyer.eu is making me question everything I thought I knew about, well, everything.
That's exactly their point. They're trying to make us realize that we're constantly being bombarded with information.
Oh.
And it's more important now than ever to be critical thinkers, to question the narratives that are being presented to us. Dwyer.eu, whether you agree with them or not, they offer a really valuable counter-narrative to what we usually hear from, the usual sources.
So it's not just about what's true or false, it's about who gets to decide what story we even hear in the first place. Which, that adds a whole other layer to this whole thing.
Information is power. The ability to shape the narrative. That's a powerful tool in any power struggle, especially on a global scale.
Okay, but let's bring it back to Huawei for a second. If they are as innovative as these articles suggest, if they are genuinely coming up with these breakthroughs, why should they even care what the U.S. thinks? Why not just do their own thing, forge their own path?
Because the reality is, the global tech ecosystem is incredibly interconnected. No country, no company can really operate in isolation anymore. Huawei needs access to global markets. They need those supply chains. They need the talent. The U.S. sanctions are basically designed to cut them off at the knees.
So it's not just about Huawei. It's about how the entire world develops and uses technology.
Exactly. What happens with Huawei, this struggle, it's going to have a ripple effect on the global economy, on the balance of power, even on the nature of technological innovation in the 21st century.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Huawei under attack, their counteroffensive, this whole idea of hypocrisy, double standards, the information war. My brain is a little fried. But there's one more thing I want to unpack before we move on.
Okay, I'm listening. What else caught your eye?
This whole Open RAN thing that the U.S. is pushing as the secure alternative to Huawei. Some of these Dwyer.eu articles, they're raising some red flags. Like they quote a report from a German think tank that basically calls out Open RAN's potential vulnerabilities. It's almost like the U.S. is so focused on containing Huawei that they're willing to push a solution that might be even less secure.
And that's where I think the narrative starts to maybe unravel a bit.
Yeah.
The U.S. argument is that Open RAN is more secure because it's open and transparent, right? More scrutiny, more eyes on the code. But like that Journal report points out, the complexity of Open RAN, all those different vendors, the integration, well, it creates a whole new set of vulnerabilities that, frankly, malicious actors could exploit.
So it's like swapping your sturdy front door for a fancy fence, but with holes in it. It might look more open, but is it actually more secure?
That's a great way to put it. That complexity, it introduces all these new points of failure. And if there's one thing we've learned from, well, everything, it's that complexity is often the enemy of security.
So if Open RAN isn't the silver bullet, then what is? What does a genuinely secure and reliable 5G future even look like?
That's the million-dollar question, and unfortunately, there's no easy answer. The reality is that any complex technological system is going to have vulnerabilities. The key is a robust, multi-layered approach to security. You need those technical safeguards, strong governance, international cooperation, and constant vigilance.
So it's not about finding that one perfect tech, it's about managing the risks and staying one step ahead.
Exactly. And that requires a level of transparency, collaboration, and honestly, a willingness to admit that no single country or company has all the answers.
Man, this has been an incredible deep dive. I feel like I've gone from casual news reader to international espionage analyst in the span of an hour. You've given me a lot to think about.
It's been a pleasure unpacking all this with you. And remember, this information war, it's ongoing. Keep asking those questions. Keep challenging the narratives. The more informed we all are, the better we are at navigating this crazy, complex, rapidly evolving world.
Well said. And for you, dear listener, I hope this deep dive has given you a new perspective on this whole Huawei saga. It's not just about smartphones and 5G, it's about the future of technology, and that's something that affects all of us. We'll be sure to include links to all the dwyer.eu articles we talked about in the episode description so you can check them out for yourself. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and until next time, happy diving. It's like we're seeing this real-time case study in how technology is shifting global power. And dwyer.eu makes this point that this Open RAN push, it's about more than just security. It's almost like the West trying to regain control of the tech landscape. They even use the term technological colonialism.
It's a strong term, for sure. Provocative. But, there's a grain of truth there. The U.S. has, for a long time, benefited from being top dog in tech, setting the standards, making the rules, reaping those economic rewards. And Huawei's rise, China's ambitions in tech in general, well, it challenges that whole established order.
So Open RAN, it's like a way to try and hit the reset button.
In a way, yeah. It's about reasserting Western influence, even if it means maybe some sacrifices in the short term.
Dwyer.eu seems to be saying that this whole fragmentation of the tech world could backfire on everyone though, right? Even the West?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fragmentation has its costs. It can stifle innovation. It definitely adds complexity, makes it harder to ensure everything works together smoothly.
Not to mention security, which is the whole point, right?
Yeah. Right. But on the other hand, you could argue that a more diverse market, more competition, could actually lead to faster innovation in the long run. More choices for consumers, too. It's a tough balancing act. Too early to say which way it'll tip.
Talk about a gamble. Okay, but here's a question that keeps coming back to me. If the U.S. is so worried about security, why not just go all in on developing their own secure 5G? Why this whole Open RAN thing? It seems a little, roundabout.
You've hit on a really key point. Developing this kind of cutting-edge technology, it takes time, resources, long-term vision. And that's something that, some argue has been lacking in the West for a while now. Huawei's rise, it took a lot of people by surprise. They've been investing heavily in research and development, attracting top talent, playing the long game, so to speak.
And the U.S. is trying to play catch-up.
In a way, yes. Open RAN, for all its flaws, it buys them some time. Time to regroup, time to hopefully foster a more competitive environment where they can, keep up.
So it's not just about who has the smartest engineers. It's about strategy, long-term planning, maybe even a little bit of national pride.
It's more than just national pride. This goes way beyond smartphones and 5G networks. It's we're seeing a microcosm of this massive geopolitical shift that's happening where, whoever controls the tech controls, pretty much everything.
The future.
The future. Exactly. And what I find so interesting, going back to those dwyer.eu articles, is how they connect this whole Open RAN strategy to this bigger theme of control. They're saying the West is trying to hit the reset button, reshape the tech world in their favor.
Exactly. It's they're saying, okay, we might not be able to beat them at their own game, so we're going to change the rules of the game. But that seems, risky. Are they really willing to risk their own interests just to keep Huawei in check? That's the million-dollar question. And it's a gamble for sure. Fragmentation, it creates all these new problems, potential security risks, compatibility issues, probably even slower rollout times.
Not to mention making things more complicated, which we've already established is never a good thing when it comes to security. Exactly. But the thinking is, at least from the West's perspective, that a more diverse market, even if it's a little messy at first, will eventually lead to more innovation, more options for everyone.
So it's a long game. A long, risky game. But what about us, the everyday people caught in the middle of all this? This is all very high-level stuff. Why should we care about the Huawei saga? It's easy to feel that's just politics. Doesn't really affect me.
And that's where it gets really interesting. because it's not just about these abstract geopolitical moves, right? This is about the technology that's going to shape how we live, how we work, how we interact with the world around us.
Okay, yeah. You put it like that.
This is the infrastructure for self-driving cars, for smart cities, for things we haven't even thought of yet. The decisions that are being made right now about who controls this technology, how it's developed, they'll have a ripple effect on our lives for years, probably decades to come.
Wow. Okay. You've given us a lot to think about. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
Stay curious, stay informed, and don't just accept the first story you hear. The future of technology, it's not set in stone. We all have a role to play in shaping it.
Well said. And for you, dear listener, thanks for joining us on this journey. We encourage you to check out those dwyer.eu articles for yourselves, dive into those different perspectives. We'll include links to all of them in the episode description. Keep exploring, keep asking those questions, and until next time, happy diving.